Okay, so to continue the scenario number one, where we're transacting between BAPS Inc. and Miami in the Southeast Company, uh, we had shown how we would enter the invoices and book the invoices on either side. I've gone ahead and posted the invoice that we had in BAPS Inc. So just to pick up from there. And I did this deliberately so we can show you also how you can find things in the system easily. So if I go here and look at my posted documents, look at purchase invoices, this is one way to find the document that we were just handling for $300. Uh, and if I want to go ahead and see more about this document, I can click here, open it up, so we can see what we actually entered in terms of our two line items of expense. One was an intercompany, and one was just a local expense for $200. That's one way to look things up. I also like, as we probably looked at in another video, going to GL registers. That shows me always the last thing I did. And from here again, I can go look at the GL entries. So just to refresh ourselves, these are the entries we just made where we credited two different liability accounts, 2010 and 2012. And we'll be continuing to do the payment for this document. Many ways to do payments in the system for customer organizations where they do a handful at a time. They like the pay now feature. We can go in and narrow down. I'm going to go ahead and do a quick filter here. And the vendor that I had transacted against was John Roberts in my previous example. Let's go ahead and pick that, and this shows that I actually have two invoices due to John Roberts. The pay now capability is for sporadic payments or, just one check at a time typically, and I can just say pay now and go to manual computer or electronic checks. I'm not going to do it here, so we can show you the mass way to do payments, and you'll see all the different options come into play. And for that, I'm going to actually use a payment journal. And the payment journal is a place where we process all kinds of payments, manual payments, paper checks, and ACH in terms of electronic. Everything works to the same place. So typically the process here would be that I'm going to suggest vendor payments. And what I've done here is notice I'm saying I want to pay everything that's due by the 16th. And in this scenario, I'm just going to set it up initially as a manual check and then show you how I would make that a computer check or electronic payment in our upcoming scenarios. In this case, I just picked the one vendor. Typically, if we're running a weekly check run, we would leave this field blank and collect all the things that are due for payment at the time. So if I hit OK here, and it is now pulled in the two invoices that are due for payment. One I had pre-existing here for 1010, and this is a $300 invoice that we just created uh, for our previous scenario of the intercompany invoice. I'm just going to clear this one out since this is not really relevant to our scenario and continue and process the payments of this one. If I just leave it as a manual check, basically I would be setting up, entering my manual check number if I hand wrote a check, or this is also a way to, after the fact, write the transaction in the system if it's automatically being done in the bank through a payment advice, etc. We want to record them in here. That could happen through an import, as you can see here, or so to a manual entry. We do a preview posting and look at what this payment is going to do, and it doesn't matter whether it's a manual, computer, or electronic, it's going to do the same entries in the system, just the process is going to be different. But when we do this transaction, so you'll notice that we're now clearing those two different liability accounts, 2010 and 2012, the way we entered it on the purchase invoice, where you wanted to select which payable account you wanted to target at the line item level. So you notice the first line, number 30,000, was to my normal trade payable, and the second line, which internally got numbered to 40,000, uh, went to my expense payable account based on the vendor posting groups we selected. I'm not going to post this right now because I want to leave this transaction here. The main thing that changes when we're doing different kinds of processing on the suggest vendor payments, we would have picked uh, in this drop-down field, I want to do computer checks, I want to do electronic payments. Okay, typically those are the three options that we're going to be using. Since I've already run this, I'm not going to bother running it again because I've already selected it. But in order to change the way I want to process this, I can now change this to computer check. And if it's a computer check, let's just open up here on the side, the statuses. You can see the statuses, this transaction that we're showing is going through. We have not printed a check yet. So again, it has not gone through the process. So if I try to do anything with this point in time, it'll say, well, we haven't done a check. So in this scenario, I'm just going to go ahead and print a check. And there's many options on printing checks. It picks up my last check number from my bank account. You have the ability to combine multiple invoices onto one check, or if we check this off, then it'll produce a single check per invoice that's out there because some vendors like to do it that way. And I'm going to go ahead and send this to PDF. Sorry, got a dry throat today. So here's a check we printed for $300. Okay, you can also do maker check printing where the system would automatically generate the maker at the bottom, so you can just use blank paper stock, if you will. So having handled the checks, you notice the document number has been assigned to the next check number, and now I can go ahead and continue to post the check through to the system. Again, I'm not going to do that, so I can use the same transaction to show you how the ACH flow would work, but essentially the next step here after I've done my check run will be to go ahead and post, and that would finalize everything in the system. Instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, well, whoopsie, I really didn't want to do this. I'm going to void this check right away. Sorry, I was positioned on the wrong line here. You either go void all checks and it'll do everything in the batch, or I actually need to be positioned on the individual check that I want to void. So it's just positioned on the wrong line there. Go ahead and say, yes, we want to void it, and you notice everything's been set back to the way it was. If I want to do an electronic payment, I would have set it up that way. There's also ways to code things when you enter that they're going to be designated to be paid electronically, so you can automatically select everything that you typically would want to do electronically. So there's lots of setup options to do that. And in the case of electronic, my steps are different, obviously, than a paper check. The first thing I'm going to do is do an export of my batch. And when I export my batch, we set it, let me change the settlement date to today, entering the letter T there. Change posting dates to match, say okay. Sorry, I have not set up my vendor for electronic payments. That's what this error is saying. Uh, I have to on the vendor and the vendor bank record set it up for electronic payments. So what I'll do is I'll go ahead and leave this as is. And when we do the other side of the entry in the sister company to pay back to headquarters, I'll set up that before I start another video so we don't waste time here. And go ahead and process. But just to give you an idea of what this error indicated, so you can see the flexibility again in the system. If I go look at my vendor record, there are many options in the vendor record, and some of the things are, this is where we set up the vendor bank account. And I'll show you that in the next video. Okay, so basically, having processed this, I'm going to go back and make it a computer check, and let's go ahead and finish the payment in the headquarter company, if you will, and make like we actually did want to produce a paper check for these guys. Let's go ahead and do a print check. Notice now the system will always log a number that's been used. So even though we voided that last check 97, the system will use that number internally and log it so that it reduces the risk of fraud in terms of people maybe regenerating a check number that was actually voided. So there's lots of capability in the system to do that. Let's go ahead and print this check again. And this time I'm going to go ahead and say, yes, this was a good check. We're going to go ahead and process it. And now we'll just post this transaction. Okay, so we're done with the headquarter side in terms of paying my intercompany invoice out. And essentially, again, if we go look at our registers, you'll see that the last thing I did here now is something that came from my payment journal. I'm the person who did it. This is the day I did it. And then again, if we go look here at the vendor ledger entries, you'll see there's a payment transaction out here for the amount of $300. And if I want to go ahead and see what that payment was paying, I select the applied entries button here, and we can see that in this case, I actually paid this one invoice for $300, and we're done in terms of our processing. I'm going to go ahead and pause here. I'll set up the vendor bank account information on the sister company side, where we're actually going to pay back to our headquarter company, and then we'll continue the video from there. Okay, we just left off and we posted our invoice in the parent company, which is our Cronus nonprofit, and the sister company here represents the equivalent of BAPS Southeast Company, where we actually will make our payment back to my headquarter company. So again, in this case, I went ahead and finished and posted that invoice we had before. So let's just quickly look at our posted purchase invoices in the system just to refresh you. So this is the document that we set up over in the subsidiary company. And in this case, we're paying to our intercompany partner vendor, which would be, in your case, BAPS Inc. I'm just tagging it to the IC Cronus nonprofit company partner that I have. This was the invoice that we received from the parent company that we're paying. And we went ahead and posted the fact that we're going to pay $100 out to that intercompany vendor. So in this case, I'm still going to use my payment journal, just like we just did for the corporate side of the transaction. And if we go into the payment journal, I've gone ahead and selected the vendor, which is my IC Cronus nonprofit. This would be BAPS Inc. for you. So this is a vendor record that we initiated in that invoice, that in-company invoice that we had. And in this case, I've got it set up to do electronic. And remember, we got that error trying to do electronic in the last example. I just want to show you what I had not set up properly. If I go look at my vendor record here and edit that record, what I had not done is set up the vendor bank accounts to denote what is the bank account for that vendor. And in this scenario, I just pretty much set up a dummy routing number, etc. The key things you need to do is say what their bank account name is for that vendor, what their bank number is, and what their transit number is, and that pretty much sets you up for the ability to generate an electronic file to process a payment back to them. You can also tag if their account is a checking or savings account in the system because there's some coding differences when we produce the ACH file. So let's just quickly jump back here to our journal. Notice how I can easily drill down and move around the system without having to go back to menus, etc. I like to do things while I'm sitting somewhere and just go dive and take care of things, look at things. You could always have gone up here and said, let me look at my vendors, and kind of got to a similar path where you start with the vendor list, etc. But here I would do a search and so on to find that vendor. I like to just drill down, and if you go select from full list, you actually open up the same vendor list, and now you have all the actions that you would have off that vendor list. So without having to run around a menu system that might be restrictive to you. Okay, so essentially what we've done here is exactly what we did. We did a suggest vendor payments. In this case, it's suggest vendor payments. We selected the vendor and we said, I want to generate all my payments as electronic. I'd reference that we have ways of setting up the system to automatically manage these things. So if you had actually posted that invoice with a payment method of ACH as an example, that's a way to automatically draw all those transactions uh, that you posted as invoices, and you can make that decision ahead of time that you want to pay everything via ACH for those invoices so that you can make sure that you don't accidentally pay something the wrong way if you don't want to do that. Okay, so I'm not going to do select that because I did not post it that way. And I actually am not going to say okay here because I've already done that to generate this line item here. Notice that because of my dates, I'm just doing demo posting. Uh, if I have problems and when I'm trying to pay things, the system will highlight them just to alert you that you maybe have done this a little bit late in the game, so the red color would come on based on the combination of dates I entered. Okay, from now the steps are pretty simple. I have to export the file. I have the ability to void it if I decide to change my mind. You have to come back and acknowledge that you've transmitted it. And then you have the ability to issue remittance advices where every vendor will electronically get an email to let them know, or you could print them out and stuff them into envelopes if you chose. I typically recommend that we automatically email. So when we do export here, we're going to export again because I did a test run before, as you can see. So I have my ACH file sitting here. I'm going to go ahead and run it again. And you notice I have a new file sitting here. Let's go ahead and take a look at this file. And let's see, how do we want to open this? All my options. Just looking for a notepad. Okay, and there's the ACH file. Obviously, if you had multiple transactions in there, this file will be created. And what you would now do is go to your bank's software and upload this file and process it. And once you're done, you need to come back and just acknowledge the fact that you actually did that. Okay, so this is just a message that says you now need to do the process based on how your bank wants to do it. We could make enhancements where those things could get pushed automatically up to the bank. That's usually a custom because every bank is different in terms of how they receive things, so that you won't have the manual step. And that's a possible enhancement that we could look into. So let's say I'm ready to transmit, I'm done. Just verify did the transmission work properly, and yes. And now if we look at our status box here on the electronics, we've exported the checks, export file name. So that's recorded and, for audit purposes in the system, but we have not printed remittances yet. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and do the issue of the remittance advices. I'm sorry, I don't remember how I have my setup in the demo where these are actually going to go. But let's go ahead and say, oh, okay, so I permit the print PDF. I'm going to choose PDF. Haven't done this in a long time. Let's take a look and see. Okay, so you'll see what the remittance advice would look like if you do it on paper. And if you chose the email mechanism, it would actually create these PDFs and electronically email them um, uh, to your vendors. Okay, so now we're generated, you notice my status change, everything's done, and I can now go ahead and come back and post that payment and we're done. Uh, the next step here is something we'll have to add for you because the base Business Central doesn't do this automatically. Well, as soon as we post this, what we'll do is in your parent company is create a general transaction. And again, I emphasize that we have not built this yet. This is something we will build for you in the fixed cost uh, uh, you know, proposal that we've issued, where once we've done this transaction, we'll come in and automatically create an entry to record the fact that you deposited the money of for $100 in that case. And here you'll relieve your intercompany AR account. And so this is a transaction we'll make for you automatically, so you don't have to manually enter it. And this will go ahead and relieve your intercompany uh, receivable, credit it out, and also deposit the money into your bank account in the parent company. Uh, Again, the reason this will take a little work is because obviously we have to set up these relationships and make sure that we've set up a bank account code that mirrors the definition of the vendor account code, and that's just something we have to link together. Okay, so hopefully you've seen us take those invoices that we created both to pay our vendor in the parent company, handle the liability that we created in the subsidiary company, process payments either way, whether you want to just code them or code them as manual, computer check, or electronic. So hopefully you've seen the entire range of options, and I've tried to present you a picture of lots of different points of flexibility, and also just let you know that there are some automatic sort of macro processes that we want to build based on the relationships and how you actually want to set up your relationships with bank accounts and GL accounts between companies, and that would be part of our implementation process.